The late October sun cast a soft orange glow over the rugged peaks of the mountain as Emily tightened the straps on her backpack. The day had been long but exhilarating. Crisp air, the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot, and the solitude of the wilderness gave her a sense of peace that only hiking alone could offer. At 25, Emily had developed a love for hiking as a form of escape from the demands of her busy life. She was a journalist, often working the whole week, not only on work days. She was young and she could do it, but in the nature she could clear her mind, let go of her worries, and reconnect with herself. As she made her way up the trail, dusk began to settle in. She knew she should start heading back to camp soon, but the trail ahead seemed so inviting. Just 1 more kilometer, she thought. The scenery was breathtaking, with towering pine trees and the occasional glimpse of distant mountains fading into twilight. But as she walked, the once peaceful woods took a different atmosphere in the dimming light. Shadows stretched longer, and the forest grew eerily quiet. A sudden rustling sound broke the silence. Emily stopped in her tracks, her heart pounding. She scanned the trees but saw nothing. Maybe a deer or a raccoon, she thought, trying to calm herself. But a nagging sense of unease crept in. She had been hiking these trails for years and knew that the wilderness could be unpredictable, especially at night. Continuing cautiously, Emily rounded a bend in the trail and nearly collided with someone standing in the middle of the path. She gasped and took a step back, her breath catching in her throat. It was an old man. He stood hunched over slightly, his grey beard unkempt, wearing a faded flannel shirt and hiking boots that looked well worn. His face was edged with deep lines, his eyes hollow and tired. Emily's initial shock was quickly replaced by a chill that ran down her spine. There was something off about him, something that set her instincts on edge. "Didn't mean to startle you," the old man said, his voice raspy but calm. "No, it's okay," Emily stammered, her mind racing. What was an old man doing out here alone at this time of the night? She forced a polite smile, trying to keep her fear in check. The man stared at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said quietly. "It's not safe." Emily swallowed hard. The unease she had been feeling all day now morphed into a tangible fear. Was he warning her or threatening her? Her eyes flicked to the woods around her, calculating how quickly she could get away if she needed to. "I know," she said, her voice shaking. "I was just heading back to my campsite." The man nodded but didn't move. His eyes seemed distant, as if he were lost in a memory. Emily shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tightening around the straps of her pack. "Where are you headed?" she asked, hoping to deflect his attention and give herself an excuse to walk away. "Nowhere in particular," he replied, his voice low. "I like to walk these trails at night. Been doing it for years." He paused, then added softly, "Ever since the accident." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She didn't ask what accident he was referring to, but she could see the pain in his eyes, the way his shoulders sagged under an invisible weight. Something had happened to this man, something terrible. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said gently, turning away from him. "I should really be getting back now." The man's gaze sharpened suddenly. "Be careful out there," he said, his tone urgent. "There are things in these woods that you can't always see coming." Emily nodded, her pulse quickening. She turned and hurried down the trail, feeling the man's eyes on her back until she rounded a corner and was out of sight. Her mind was racing with questions. Who was he? What had happened to him? And why did he seem so strange? As night fully descended, the temperature dropped and the darkness closed in around her. The shadows of the trees loomed taller, and the silence of the forest pressed against her ears. Emily quickened her pace, her breath coming in shallow bursts. And then she heard it, a long growl. Her blood froze. Slowly she turned her head to the side, scanning the trees. The sound came again, closer this time. Her heart pounded as she saw movements in the underbrush. A bear, a large dark shape lungering out of the shadows. Panic surged through her. She had read about bear encounters, knew what to do in theory, but none of that knowledge seemed useful now as the massive creature emerged, his eyes locked on her. Emily's mind screamed for her to run, but she knew better. Running would trigger the bear's predatory instinct. Instead, she slowly backed away, trying to make herself appear non-threatening, her breath hitching with each step. But the bear wasn't retreating. It was coming closer, its growls deep and menacing. In a sudden terrifying moment, the bear lunged. Emily stumbled back, her heart racing, and fell hard onto the ground. She tried to scramble away, but the bear was on her, its massive claws swiping dangerously close. She raised her arms to shield herself, certain that this was the end. Then, out of nowhere, the old man appeared. He moved with a speed and strength that belied his age, wielding a large branch like a weapon. He swung it at the bear, shouting loudly, drawing the animal's attention away from Emily. The bear roared in response, swiping at the man, but he didn't back down. With another swing, he struck the bear across its muzzle. The creature hesitated for a moment, then retreated into the woods with a final guttural growl. Emily lay there trembling, her heart racing in her chest. She couldn't believe what had just happened, how close she had come to death, and how this strange haunted man had saved her life. She struggled to her feet, her legs shaking. "Thank you," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. You saved me." The old man turned to her, his eyes tired but calm. "You should get back to your camp," he said softly. "Don't stay out here any longer." I don't know how to thank you," Emily stammered, overwhelmed by what had just happened. The man gave her a sad smile, then turned and walked away into the trees, disappearing into the darkness as if he had never been there at all. Emily stood there for a long moment, trying to process everything. She finally made her way back to her campsite, her mind swirling with confusion and gratitude. Who was that man, and why had he helped her? The next morning, as she packed up her gear and headed back to town, Emily couldn't shake the memory of the old man and the bear attack. When she stopped at a small cafe to grab breakfast and a newspaper, her eyes caught a headline that sent a chill through her. "Car accident leaves family dead, driver hospitalized." The article described a horrific crash that had occurred late last night. A car had veered off the road near the town, killing a family of 4. The only survivor was the driver, a man who had been badly injured and was now in critical condition at the local hospital. The name of the driver jumped out at her: Alexander Jones. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. That was the name the old man had given her, Alexander Jones. She hurried to the hospital, needing answers. When she asked the nurse at the front desk about Alexander Jones, the woman frowned and checked her records. "I'm sorry," the nurse said quietly. "Mr. Jones passed away during the night. He never regained consciousness after the accident." Emily stared at the nurse, her mind reeling. How could that be possible? She had seen him, talked to him. He had saved her life. As she walked out of the hospital, her thoughts raced. Had she really encountered Alexander Jones' ghost that night? A man who had lost his family in a car accident years ago, only to meet a similar fate? She couldn't explain it, but deep down she knew one thing for certain. Alexander Jones had saved her life, whether he was living or not. And now, as she looked back at the dark, mysterious woods, she felt a strange sense of peace.